out the secret strategies of the 1%.
It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Brian, I am super excited about this show because I feel like these types of shows are the ones where we get to really flex. We get to kind of roll up our sleeves and share some of the things that we do for our clients, some of the like unique, maybe lesser known strategies that we help our folks implement to kind of go above and beyond.
But look, Bo, this is going to be different than what a lot of other YouTube channels are doing, because most systems out there where people, maybe even we had it, because we get every now and then I get told, hey, sometimes the ads on y'all's channel are really annoying. By the way, we don't control that, but it are people pitching systems typically telling you, hey, this is what the rich and famous do. This is what the successful do. You too can be just like this if you'll buy my system. So you're like, wait a minute, aren't you guys also tied into a system or something? I'm like, yeah, it's called the abundance cycle, where guess what? We give you the advice and the answers for free, betting on the better future self of you, so that when you get so successful that you will need to hire a financial planner to do some of these complex strategies that we will be covering today.
So we're going to go through some of the ones that we do, but we thought it'd be interesting to share with you some headlines of some things that you've probably seen, some things that have been out there in the popular financial media. Let's see, here's a billionaire contact list. If you were to read through this explains how you ought to just, ask billionaires to give you money. I guess that might be a lucrative strategy. Here's the secret to becoming a millionaire: 7 streams of income that will skyrocket you to financial success. Or, Brian, I know this is your favorite one: the power of leverage will make you rich. And this is the very first sentence. It is absolutely necessary to use leverage if you want to become wealthy. Brian, I know we have a
wait a minute, read the next one too. In fact, you'll need to use massive amounts of leverage.
That's right. The more leverage you use, the more leverage you need to use. That just sounds insane, right? That sounds absolutely out of this world. We have a different take. We have a different take on strategies and things that you can look at and pursue that isn't this like get rich quick crazy stuff. It's more like practical, actionable things that might be valuable tools in your financial planning tool belt.
And look, I don't mind sharing. Some of these strategies are so good that as of last year, the government was trying to take some of this away.
That's right.
So I want you to pay attention, because some of these strategies are so good that the government is literally trying to close them off. So take advantage of them while they're still available.
So here's the first strategy we're going to talk about. The actual technical name should be an annual tax-free Roth conversion strategy. But that's not what most people know this as. Most people affectionately call this the Backdoor Roth IRA strategy.
Now, what we like about this is Roth IRAs should be universally loved. I mean, what is not to like about the fact that we know we love investing, we love exponential growth, but the bad side is that even with exponential growth, usually you have to pay our favorite taxing uncle, long-term capital gains or dividends. It doesn't matter what it is, or if it's a bond, ordinary income.
Yep.
But the thing is, with Roth accounts, you put the money in, yes, you don't get a tax deduction on the front end, but whatever it turns into is completely tax-free. It's such a great opportunity that the government has actually put restrictions on who can do Roth IRAs. And they limit, if you make too much money, they limit by how you file your tax returns and other things. We're going to talk about this is a way that you can actually still participate in the tax-free Roth even if you make too much.
Yeah, the tax-free growth is just one of the many benefits. There are actually a number of benefits, and even above and beyond that. One, no required minimum distributions at age 72. With 401ks and IRAs, the government makes you start pulling that money out. With Roth IRAs, you can buy low-cost index funds, so low expenses, low fees. You get the tax-free growth and tax-free distributions, just like you mentioned. In a Roth IRA with a large custodian, you have a huge opportunity to invest in the entire investment universe, and you get flexibility with contributions. Meaning you can put up to the limit or as little as you desire every single year, and you can even put in money for last year, this year. So it has a little bit of a time machine. You mentioned though, Brian, there are some limitations. Not everybody gets to do Roth IRAs.
Yeah, let's talk about this. I'll actually give you some numbers for 2022. If you're a single person, it phases out between $129,000 to $144,000 for single filers, and then for married filing jointly, it phases out between $204,000 to $214,000 on your taxable income. So pay attention to those numbers. But a lot of you who do make over those thresholds, that's you financial mutants, you're doing well in your career. It's not over. This is why we call this backdoor Roth IRAs.
And essentially, this is what the strategy is. If you're over the income limit and you have a specific type of account structure, the government, at least for now, has said you can do an IRA contribution and you can convert that to Roth tax-free, assuming some things are in place. So the big overlying idea here is, no matter your income, even if you're someone who makes $1 million, $2 million, $10 million a year, if you have the right account structure, you may actually be able to do Roth contributions every single year.
Yeah, so Bo, we've had Daniel create a slide that will actually walk everybody through kind of a decision grid matrix on how, if you should even consider this.
So here's sort of the flow chart of, can I do a backdoor Roth? First, are you under the Roth IRA income limits that Brian just expressed? If the answer is yes, then just contribute directly to a Roth IRA. You don't need to do the backdoors anymore. If the answer is no, well, then you have to say, are Roth IRAs or inherited IRAs the only type of IRAs that I have?
Yeah.
If the answer is no, this strategy will not work for you as currently structured. If you have simple IRAs or IRA rollovers or SEP IRAs, when you go to do your conversion every year, it's going to be taxable. There's a pro rata tax calculation that will determine how much of your conversion is taxable. Only the folks who only have Roths or only have inherited IRAs can do this. So then, if your answer is yes, those are the only types of IRAs I have, you can do a contribution to a non-deductible traditional IRA. Non-deductible meaning you put it into a regular IRA, you do not take a deduction on your tax return that year, and then you can convert it to Roth. It is literally a backdoor way for high-income individuals to still be able to do Roth contributions every single year.
Yeah, if you want to know where this came about, pre-2010, you actually couldn't do Roth conversions if you made over $100,000.
That's right.
But when that legislation changed, tax laws changed to where now anybody can do Roth conversions no matter what your income is. That's what opened this up, because you're not really, Bo said it, that's why it's called backdoors, because it is a way for people in higher incomes to get in. But the actual technical way this happens is you're making a non-deductible IRA contribution, traditional IRA, and then because you're making it with after-tax dollars, when you convert that to a Roth, because anybody can convert money, it's a tax-free transaction because you didn't take a tax deduction on it. You converted it because it's now unlimited income. It's all pretty square, and it's even, we've seen tax letters, we've done notices. This works right now. It currently is an active strategy.
Now, the one place we see people trip this up the most is they forget that piece about you cannot have any other IRA assets. If you have a rollover IRA from a previous job, if you have a SEP, if you have a simple, if you have any other type of IRA that's not an inherited IRA or Roth IRA, you cannot do this. If you are someone in those types of situations, you may want to think through, well, does it make sense for me to consolidate my accounts into like a 401k or a 403b so that I do zero out my IRA balances? We see people trip over this all the time, think that they were doing tax-free backdoor Roths, and unfortunately, come tax time, they actually have to pay taxes on the conversion they implemented.
I mean, the big decision factor is, did you have those IRA balances as of close of the previous tax year? So pay attention to that. And then one last key point on this is that just because you have IRA assets, if your spouse does not, you are in, just like IRAs are under your social or your spouse's social security number, you might be able to have a split household, meaning that you have an IRA rollover account, so you can't do, Roth conversion or backdoor Roth strategy, but your spouse, who doesn't have any other IRA assets, could every year fund doing this backdoor strategy.
Now, you may be saying, oh man, this is awesome. This is great. This is wonderful. You're not the only person that's realized this. I think the government has also caught on that this is a strategy that a lot of wealthy people are beginning to implement. And so there's been some fervor and there's been some backlash around it.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. There's even been some headlines when this was part of the whole Build Back Better, is that this was going to get cut out, essentially closing this opportunity off. But fortunately or unfortunately, depending upon how you look at it, the government's so dysfunctional that this opportunity still sits out there. So I would encourage everybody, go see if this is something that does play into your financial, toolbox.
Okay, so Brian, we've talked about if Roth IRAs are super, super valuable and something that if we're under the income limit, we really want to take advantage of, or even if we're over the income limit, we really want to take advantage of doing that $6,000 or $7,000 IRA contribution, then more Roth is probably better than less Roth. And there's actually another secret planning strategy available to certain folks, and we have just affectionately called this the mega backdoor Roth.
Yeah, Roth IRAs, one of the limitations is that you can only put a few $1,000 in a year. If you're basically, what is it, $6,000?
6,000, yep, or 7,000 if you're over 50.
If you're over 50. That's how much you can put in. It's a decent amount of money, but there is bonus points territory. It's called mega backdoor Roth. When we did our episode on this in the past, talking about mega Roths, we called this the apex predator because you can put large chunks of money into a mega backdoor Roth. But here's the thing. This sounds so exciting, especially if you're in a great paying job and you have plenty of ability to save money. You have to have the right structure to even take advantage of this.
So let's talk a little bit about that structure and what that looks like. So first, what is a mega backdoor Roth? Well, it's the ability to use your 401k to make huge Roth contributions. So not just the $6,000, but we've seen folks who can do $34,000, $35,000, $40,000 of Roth contributions inside of their 401ks
per year
via the mega backdoor Roth. Here are a few things that are required. Number one, and this one is so important, your 401k plan has to actually have an after-tax contribution option. Most of us are aware of the two options that you can salary defer into a 401k. You can only do pre-tax contributions or you can do Roth contributions. A lot of folks don't realize there's actually a third type called after-tax. We actually went to one of our clients' websites and we pulled this so you can see there's a pre-tax option, a Roth option, and an after-tax option. In order to be able to take advantage of this strategy, you have to have after-tax availability in your 401k. Unfortunately, if your employer does not provide that benefit, if that's not an option with your plan, you can't do it. Now, before you get really upset, say, oh, why is my employer an awful person for not making this available? There's some additional testing required on the employer's end to make this available. So most often you see this with really large company plans. It's a little bit less common in smaller, small business type plans.
I do know when I see the ability to do a mega backdoor Roth, that you've got somebody in the plan design side that at least understands what's needed by allowing the after-tax component as well as either in-service distributions or ability to do in-service conversions.
That's right.
I mean, these things are part of the setup, but it means that you probably have an employer that's taking, or at least the advisor or the custodian that set up the plan has really tried to maximize all planning opportunities in your retirement plan. But before we get everybody all worked up and excited about this, though, there are a few downsides that we should cover, though.
Yeah, it's really exciting to be able to do this, but there are some unintended consequences, again, if you approach this not knowing exactly what you're doing. Here's the first one, and maybe the most frustrating one. You could squeeze out your employer free money. If you've been following this for any amount of time, you know how much we love free money, and employer matching, employer contributions are one of the best forms of free money in the entire world. Well, if you're contributing to the after-tax portion of your 401k and you end up filling up what's called your 415 limit, I want to say it's like 58,000, 61,000, somewhere in that, depending on which year you're looking at, you could actually put so much into your 401k that your employer doesn't have any more room to put their money in. So while it's a great benefit, you may not want to do away with your employer's free money.
The other downside on this is we see a lot of the people who do have the decision-making ability to implement these strategies. Usually you're a small business owner, you have good income coming in. you're going to weigh what your tax rate is if you're in the highest tax rate, currently around 37%, plus if you live in a high tax state, say like California where it's 13%, you're going to have to weigh, do I want to put this money into Roth, or do I want to take a current year tax deduction at the 50% discount? Because that's essentially like letting the government fund 50% of your retirement savings. So just because you can doesn't mean you always should. You kind of have to balance out what is the benefit I'm getting here, especially how many years of compounding growth. There's a lot of things in play that you do want to make sure you're checking all the boxes before you implement this strategy.
And then here's sort of the third downside. Not all plans, not all providers are created the same. So this can be administratively difficult. It's not the easiest thing in the world. Remember, you have to have these two pieces. You have to have after-tax contribution availability, and then the ability to do in-service distributions of that amount, either to the Roth portion of the 401k or to a Roth IRA. Oftentimes for employers or for the providers, you have to make a phone call every time you want to do that. And you have to be able to speak the language and tell them exactly what you're wanting to do without misappropriating and saying, oh, I want to do a rollover of my 401k, and end up distributing pre-tax dollars that you never intended on distributing. So you have to kind of know what you're doing and be willing to jump through the administrative loopholes to make sure that it's done correctly.
It is funny you say this is because we have multiple clients that I feel like every year at the end of the year, especially, we are essentially shepherds.
That's right.
That we have to go and track down and then follow and say, hey, check on, make sure things got to the different pots that they were supposed to. It does require a little more hand holding than just set it and forget it. And then, along those lines, we once again created another decision matrix that we had Daniel prepare, but walk us through, should you use the Mega Backdoor Roth?
So here's the first question you answer. Have you maxed out your 401k? Have you done the full $20,500 or $27,000 if you're over age 50? The answer is no. Max out your regular contributions first. Again, you'll have a pre-tax option, a Roth option. Do that first. If your answer is yes, are you allowed to make non-Roth after-tax contributions? Again, a lot of folks think that Roth contributions and after-tax are the same. No. They are not. You have to actually have after-tax contributions available. If the answer is no, you don't have access to this strategy. It will not work for you. If the answer is yes, does your plan allow for either in-service distributions or in-service conversions? Meaning, can I put the money into that after-tax bucket and then get it from that bucket into the Roth bucket? Without that second step, all you have is just more tax-deferred money growing, and what you really want is tax-free money growing. So if the answer is no, you can't do that strategy. If the answer is yes, you have to ask another question. Am I under the overall contribution limit? In 2022, it's $61,000 for those under 50, and it's $67,500 for those over 50. So am I over the full contribution limit? If the answer is no, then you can't do the strategy. If the answer is yes, I'm still under, then you can indeed do the Mega Backdoor Roth, and it's something you should investigate. I cannot say this enough, though. This is an advanced, complicated strategy. If you are someone in the place where you're beginning to think about this and you're starting to say, man, I wonder if I should implement this, this is a perfect time to pause and think to yourself, man, maybe I should think about taking the relationship to the next level, because this gets advanced and this gets complicated and there are big implications of this. You might want to have a co-pilot, a professional, help you navigate through these decisions.
So far, Bo, I like that we have discussed traditional just backdoor Roth contributions. We've done Mega Backdoor Roth, and those are all tax-free. There is another component of tax-free growth that we love to discuss on the show, and this is financial order of operations, step number 5 of tax-free growth. We love health savings accounts.
Yep.
HSAs are tremendous, and you guys know I love the fact that these things are triple tax advantage. I mean, it just gets me so excited to talk about it.
I'm going to go even a step further. Sometimes they're even quadruple tax advantage. We've always said triple tax, and our audience, you guys, you financial mutants, always call us on that. Yes, sometimes it's even quadruple tax advantage.
So let's talk about this, because we have siblings here. We have the HSAs that grow tax free, and we'll explain what I mean by that in a second with the triple tax advantage. But then you have Roth IRAs, and you're like, well, both of those tax free, but what makes HSAs maybe even a little more valuable than Roth? And the fact that HSAs, you get an actual deduction for your contributions. You know, when I talked about Roth IRAs, I always have one or two trolls that put a few comments on YouTube and say, quit talking about Roth grow tax-free because you don't take a tax deduction on the contribution. It is true. Your basis into Roth IRAs is not tax-free. It's after-tax money. Contributions to a health savings account, you do indeed get a tax deduction when you fund it. There's benefit number one. Number two, all those years that those assets are invested and grow, you don't pay taxes on that growth. It's growing tax deferred. That's two. Number three is if you use the money for qualified healthcare or medical expenses, it is completely withdrawn tax-free. So that's right. You got a tax deduction when you put it in, you let it grow tax-free, and then you get to pull it out completely tax-free if it's for medical purposes. And there's a 4 and a 5 benefit too. And Bo just alluded to it. If you're doing this through your employer plan and you're funding this through your paychecks and so forth, you might be exempt from paying FICA or Social Security and Medicare taxes on that. That's another benefit. And here's number 5. I guess you call it Cinco on benefits of these HSAs, is that you're actually allowed to, once you get over age 60,
60,
is it 65? 65, you can actually treat these as traditional retirement products, meaning that you don't necessarily have to use it for medical expenses. Use it for medical and healthcare if you want to be tax-free. But if you use it for retirement or just subsidizing lifestyle, you can get access to these funds. They're just taxed at ordinary income tax rates on the gains.
Now, here's one thing I love about HSAs, Brian. With Roth IRAs, they're so good that the government imposed an income limit. Said if you make over X amount of dollars, you cannot contribute to Roth IRAs. HSAs are not that way. There's no income limit on the ability to contribute or the ability to deduct contributions. The one thing that you must have, though, in order to be able to fund a health savings account is you have to be a participant in a high deductible health plan. You have to be covered either through your employer or through the insurance that you've bought for yourself or your family in a high deductible plan. If you are in a high deductible health plan, you can contribute to an HSA and you can take advantage of at least 3 of those 5 tax deductions.
So let's talk about the structure just slightly. In the high deductible health plan, the name would imply that more of the burden of healthcare is probably going to fall on the participant. It's not going to be, because I think a lot of people are used to PPOs and then the Cadillac type insurance policies. You walk into the doctor, you pay a $10 copay. The rest is taken care of by the health insurance. With a high deductible health plan, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, your insurance policy is really catastrophic coverage only. The rest, you're kind of just getting access to their discounts of the provider. And that's why there are limits on how much you can put in these. If I talked about previously, step 1 was you get a tax deduction on what you put into health savings accounts. For in a single individual, it's $3,650 in 2022. For family coverage, it's $7,300. Those are the parts to take about. But here's what I think is interesting. If deductibles are so high, what should you keep cash? Should you invest? And that does lead to the setup, because I think most people, you would think after they cover their out-of-pocket in 1 year or their deductible in 1 year, they'd want to maximize the investment part. But Bo, that's not what the data shows. The data shows that 96% of people are just using this as a clearing account, meaning that they put the money in, they take a tax deduction in the current year of contribution, but then they have medical expenses and they pull the money right back out to reimburse themselves. You notice we just basically said, okay, that's step 1. You put it in for a tax deduction. And then you took advantage of step 3 as you pulled it right back out tax-free to reimburse yourself. We skipped that also important part of the tax-free growth, meaning that in order to take advantage of the true 3 triple tax advantage things, you have to actually invest a portion of this money so that it grows tax-free and that tax-deferred, and then when you pull it out some point in the future, it's completely tax-free. There's only 4% of the population that's taking advantage of that financial mutant strategy.
Now, look, from a cash flow standpoint, it's kind of hard because what are you actually doing? You're saying, I'm going to put money into a health savings account, and then I'm going to cover all of my other expenses from cash flow. I'm going to pay for that out of pocket. So yeah, it is a little bit more expensive from a cash flow perspective, but I do love, Brian, that what you can do is you can save all of those expenses you incur. So even if you're paying for it out of pocket right now, save the receipts, keep a spreadsheet, keep a running total. You can actually reimburse yourself from your health savings account at some point in the future for medical expenses that you incurred today. So if you get $10,000 into an HSA and it grows to $20,000, and over the last couple of years you've accumulated $20,000 of medical expenses you've paid for, you can reimburse yourself for 100% of those expenses tax-free. There is no statute of limitations on how long you can carry that forward.
I think my wife, because she knows I take receipts, she knows anytime we have eyeglasses for the kids or she gets contacts renewed for herself or just anything,
urgent care, any of that stuff.
You give me the receipt, I take it to work, and she finally asked me, this was only a few weeks ago, she goes, what are you doing with all these receipts? I mean, what's going on? I don't understand the whole how this is working. I was like, look, here's the thing. I'm tracking all of these receipts. Yes, we're paying for it out of our own cash flow, but realize we have mega medical expenses because, having a special needs child with a special schooling, a special instruction site where I get a letter from the school and doctors and other things saying, hey, this school is because your kid is unique and we are, essentially a medical provider with all the therapies, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and all these other things. But you're not really getting to take advantage of, you're spending all this money. But here's what I daydream about. We all know the first 10 years of investing, that's not the meaty or frothy part of it. That's primarily your contributions into the plan. It's really years 15, 20, and beyond where you get that exponential compounding growth. Right. I daydream about the fact, because I am tracking all these receipts, that my investment accounts and my health savings account are going to exponentially grow to where all that reimbursement, when I pull it out in retirement or whenever else, will be completely tax-free. I mean, that's the type of stuff that financial mutants are trying to figure out. How do we maximize and take advantage of the current tax policy to see, is there any opportunity for me to do this better? All
right, Brian. So we've talked a lot about tax incentivized accounts. Talked about Roth IRAs, mega backdoor Roths, health savings accounts. Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's stay in that investing mindset, but let's talk about a strategy that you can utilize inside of your non-tax incentivized accounts. And one of those strategies is tax loss harvesting or tax gain, capital gain avoidance. These are two huge strategies that you get to do inside of your currently taxable accounts. Those are joint accounts, individual accounts, trust accounts that you hold investments inside of.
So this might be something, because we're in a volatile time right now. I mean, we've got geopolitical risk out there. We got inflationary risk. There's a lot of things out there creating market volatility. But give them the textbook definition of what this concept of tax loss harvesting even is.
That's exactly. Tax loss harvesting is the practice of selling a security that has a loss, and then by realizing those losses, investors may offset taxes on gains and or income. So this is what people are hearing, right? Oh, okay, so like I bought this thing for $1,000 and now it's worth $800, so I'm going to sell it at $800 just so I can harvest losses? That sounds insane. Why would I do that? I've heard I never lose money in the market until I sell. Yeah. And now you're telling me to sell, right?
Yeah, because there is this interesting component is that when you're a long-term investor, you do hear people all the time say you don't really lose until you sell. Exactly what you said. But we realize the world is much more nuanced than that. And if you're not taking advantage of the tax code and the way it is structured, you might be missing out on something. And we've done, to create a teachable moment, we've actually got a case study on this.
That's exactly right. So let's assume that you have two investors. You got Timmy and you got Tina. Both of them have $100,000 invested in an index fund within their taxable brokerage account. Well, let's say that they're investing in this year and things get volatile and the value of that investment drops by 20% to $80,000. So immediately, it's a less than ideal thing. None of us want to invest. None of us want to plan on losing 20% of our investment, but it's a reality with investors. This does happen. Well, one thing that Timmy decides to do is he says, you know what, I'm going to sell that $80,000 of investment A, and I'm going to invest in a different fund that is similar but different. It's not the exact same type of investment, but it's different. So I'm just going to sell the $80,000, lock in that $20,000 loss, then I'm going to go buy $80,000 of something else. So maybe you go from one international index to another, or one small cap fund to another similar small cap fund. Then let's assume Tina does nothing. So they're both sitting at $80,000. Well, the market recovers and both of the investments go back to $100,000. You might be thinking, oh, well, they're both in the same spot. They both invested $100,000. They have $100,000 left. From an investment standpoint, that's true. However, from a tax standpoint, Timmy has an advantage. Because he's traded investments at that $80,000 level, he now has a loss of $20,000 that he can use to offset capital gains in this year and then up to $3,000 of ordinary income. And if he doesn't use it all, he can actually carry it forward into future years as well.
What I like is that you've basically turned a round trip of the volatility of the market turned into now a taxable loss transaction that could actually benefit you when you file your taxes in the year. Now, I know a lot of people are going to sit there, all my financial mutants, this is the part about when you attract such smart people in your audience. They're going to say, yeah, but there's a problem with this, Brian, is that you've actually adjusted your basis. Mm-hmm. Instead of your basis being 100,000, you actually lowered it down to 80,000 with the rebuy. That's why I'm telling you guys, I love these advanced strategies because they coordinate. You don't do one strategy a year and call it, well, I got my one strategy in of what a wealthy person does or a financial mutant does. No, you coordinate a lot of these things together. So it's not uncommon that you take a loss harvesting strategy that, by the way, it's not only just creating the paper loss where you're taking the 3,000 or you're offsetting future gains in this portfolio. That loss might also offset gains from other capital transactions from businesses or other investments. It's a net effect that really, if you can think about it from a tax perspective, money in your pocket now from a time value of money is better than money in your pocket in the future. So that's a benefit. But here's what I'm really getting to, and this is a great segue, and I don't know how we cut this up when we make highlights. Maybe these have to go together. But you compare that lower basis with the higher basis that Bo just discussed in the background with like a charitable giving strategy. And that's what charitable giving strategies, we like to do some advanced stuff here. And I've shared this before when we talk about the financial order of operations. Go to moneyguy.com/resources if you want the free deliverable. If you want the in-depth, we actually give you a guided tour on how to accelerate your success. You can actually go to learn.moneyguy.com, and we have a full course to help you walk through the financial order of operations. But one of the things I like is that charitable giving is step 0 in the financial order of operations. Even if you don't have resources that you can give and tithe off of, you can at least give of your time. We think this is one of those primary components. But what we like to do is a lot of people, they prioritize giving to their favorite charities, but they don't know how to maximize it. And there are strategies out there that allow you to give money to your favorite institutions, but do it in a way through appreciated assets. And what I like about what we call the Money Guy giving strategy is that it allows you to keep investing. Like we always be buying. We want you, if you're filling up your bucket strategy, you've got your tax-free with the Roth, you got your tax-deferred through your employer match. By the time you get to step 7, which is hyperaccumulation of the financial order of operations, you're going to start putting money into that after-tax account, and you're going to start having taxable gains in there. And if you're charitably minded, you are really missing out if you're not taking advantage of donor-advised funds where you can gift of those appreciated assets. And a lot of you are probably wondering, why in the world would I want to gift appreciated assets? But walk them through what are the benefits and advantages of doing the Money Guy gifting strategy?
Yeah, like with most things, we like to do sort of an example or a case study. So here's like a real life example of the strategy that we like to implement. Let's assume that you have $100,000 invested in an S&P 500 fund, but you only paid $50,000 for it. So maybe you bought this a number of years ago. Maybe you bought it through the last downturn, but it's a holding that's done really well. Maybe you've been dollar cost averaging for the last couple of years, and your S&P fund has performed well. It's now up 100%. So you have $100,000 with a $50,000 basis. And let's say that you decide, I want to be charitable. I want to give $100,000 to my favorite charity, to my favorite organization. That's what I'm going to do. And let's assume because you're a large donor, you are a wealthy individual, your capital gains rate is 23.8%. So most folks would think, okay, if I want to give $100,000 to charity, I'll just sell that fund and I'll pay the capital gains and then I'll give whatever's left over to the charity. Well, what actually ends up happening when you do that is if you sell that fund, and you got to pay 23.8% on the $50,000 gain, you're going to lose $12,000 to tax, $11,900.
And that, by the way, that doesn't even take account if you live in a high tax state, because
exactly
there could be additional
federal
savings on your state income taxes too.
So what happens is you sell the $100,000 holding, you pay $11,900 in taxes, your charity gets $88,100, and you get an $88,100 tax deduction. However, if you used a charitable giving fund or donor advised fund, you can actually give all $100,000 of that appreciated security to the fund, and then you could grant those proceeds to your favorite charity. Well, when you do that, you get a $100,000 tax deduction. The charity gets a $100,000 contribution sent to them from the charitable giving fund, and you cut the tax completely out of the equation. It's a super, super, super efficient way to give money to your favorite organization.
Remember, you paid $50,000 for this investment. You gave to the charity $100,000 because that's what it appreciated to. You don't pay any income taxes on the $50,000, but when you file your tax return, the government gives you full deduction credit on the $100,000, the appreciated $100,000. You never had to pay the tax bill. That's very powerful. And we have actually bonus points territory on this. This is something that when we talk about the Money Guy charitable gifting strategy, a component that I like to say is financial mutant bonus category is that I'm buying every month. In my after-tax account, I am dollar cost averaging. I actually do it 3 times a month. We were talking about this because the market was getting beat up because of all the geopolitical stuff. And Bo and I were comparing and contrasting which days of the month we have our buys go into. And I like the fact that since I'm constantly buying in that taxable account, but I'm also every month giving charitably to my donor advised fund, over time, I'm gifting the most appreciated holdings in that account, but I'm also buying. That is effectively pushing up my cost basis in that account just in case I ever needed access to those funds. Over time, I'm actually making them easier to get access to with less tax impact by doing this giving strategy.
All right, so I want to ask you a question, Brian. Would you say that this is an accurate statement? Anyone who is charitably minded, who gives money to charity, but also has a portfolio, a portfolio with taxable assets that have appreciated, ought to consider this strategy. I mean, the example we give was a $100,000 donation. But even if you're somebody who's given $10,000 a year, this is a strategy that realistically you could implement. And instead of writing a check to the organization every month, you could just have that money flow back into your taxable account to replenish it. Right? This is broad. This isn't just for like wealthy people. This is broadly applicable for anyone.
Well, especially
right?
we have talked in the past that now that standard deduction levels are so high, we're getting close to mid 20,000 for a married filing couple, that you just don't have a lot of deductions out there. So sometimes it makes sense to stack your deductions. You might really load up your charitable giving 1 year, so maybe it's $25,000, $30,000, and then you spread those contributions from the donor advised fund to the charity over the next 2 years, and then you stack it up again so that you are, from a tax perspective, really taking advantage of where the tax policy is, but also from a discipline standpoint, showing that your charities and the organizations you want to support, that you're not cutting them off just because you found a better way to do this, to save money on taxes. I like that type of strategy. It also, I got to tell you, we have somebody here in the office, very charitably minded. They were taking advantage of getting, essentially cash back by giving on their credit card to their church and stuff. We had a whole conversation about this, and they did some math on it. For them, it did make sense to switch to this money guy giving strategy because it is pushing that basis up, giving you huge tax benefits. If you have highly appreciated assets and a strong desire to give to charities and organizations you support, give this a look-see, because you're going to find this nerdiness actually pays off.
Okay, Brian, so that's a charitable giving strategy, sort of in the accumulation phase. That's kind of where we focused. What about on the decumulation side of the equation? What about for someone who maybe is in retirement, a little bit older, a little bit later in age? Are there charitable strategies they ought to think about or consider?
Well, the ability to save for retirement is going to load up those retirement accounts. You'll actually find, as you're on your journey to wealth building, it's not uncommon to have Roth assets and tax deferred assets, because all of your employer's match funds are going to be in tax deferred before you have big pots of after tax money. So, but there's a catch with all of these type of tax favored investments. The government gives you these deals because they know at age 72, you're required to take minimum distributions, required minimum distributions. It's a thing. And these things can become rather large because you have big retirement accounts. Well, this coincides at the same time that you're on Medicare, because once you reach over 65, you get on Medicare, you drop off of your private health insurance, you might add some supplements, but Medicare premiums are highly influenced by what your annual income is. Guess what else is highly influenced by your annual income? Social Security taxability. So all these things, when you're on a fixed income in retirement, your taxability of both your Medicare premiums, how much you'll pay, as well as how much you'll pay in income taxes on your Social Security, you want to minimize how much this required minimum distribution. That's why you'll consider paying attention to a QCD strategy.
Yeah, QCDs are qualified charitable distributions. Essentially, you're allowed to take part of your required minimum distribution and direct it directly to charity. So again, let's kind of walk through a case study. Thank you, Daniel, for introducing us to Ruth. Let's say that Ruth has $70,000 in taxable income, including a $10,000 RMD, required distribution. She plans on giving $10,000 this year to her church, and so she donates it using a qualified charitable distribution. Instead of her receiving the cash and then writing a $10,000 check to the church, she says, you know what, I'm just going to distribute $10,000 directly from my IRA to the church. It's going to be a qualified charitable distribution. Well, what that does is that actually reduces her taxable income from $70,000 down to $60,000. Well, instead of her having to recognize that $10,000 reduction is going to save her $2,200 in federal income taxes. What I love about this is if she were to just take that income and write a check to charity, there's a good chance she's not even itemizing. She's probably a standard deductor, so she doesn't even get a benefit from giving that money, writing a check to charity. This is a way she can actually benefit from still being charitably inclined, even if she's not an itemized deductor on her tax return.
Yeah, I mean, the qualified charitable distributions is something I do with my mother does this, my mother-in-law does this. Anybody who's charitably minded, but also has these required distributions flowing through, you ought to at least go through the exercise to see if this is something that may benefit you. Because like Bo kind of just hit on it, most charitably minded people do get frustrated in the fact that they don't get to itemize anymore, but they still want to be charitable to give money every year. This is another way for them to do it. Yes, you don't take the tax deduction on your itemized deductions like you've done in the past, but it directly lowers your taxable income. And there's so many other things. Because I was also being a tax nerd. Think about there are 0% capital gains rates. If your income is low enough, you won't pay income taxes on capital gains. You could use strategies like this. If all of your income is primarily coming from required minimum distributions, this gives you lots of ability to play with how much you will pay taxes on. By the way, it's not an all or nothing. We have clients who will send just a few $1,000 from their required minimum distribution to some who will send all of it.
That's right.
You get to choose how much of this you want to take advantage of, but it's a great planning opportunity.
Okay, Brian. So we've talked about a lot of secret strategies or strategies for wealthy folks to implement, whether it be backdoor Roth or mega backdoor Roth or HSAs or loss harvesting or charitable giving. But maybe there's someone out there who's like, maybe they're not at 72 yet, or maybe they don't have after tax, or maybe they're not in a high deductible plan. Does that mean that there's not a strategy for them? There's nothing there available for them to take advantage of because they don't hit one of these categories?
Well, I think it's always, I feel like I'm harnessing my inner Alanis Morissette. And by the way, I was planning on, we had made an internal bet that we were going to get through this show by a certain time, and Bo is being very graceful right now, because normally we pick on each other. We always tell the content team, it's like the parents are fighting when we disagree on content. But I did think, because we've just gone through a lot of heavy lifting on deep planning, and I think it's bringing it back to the beginning, where so many people are out there telling you how to build wealth, but they're doing it in a get rich quick, where they're trying to sell you a system or doing something. We wanted to lay the groundwork of, all these strategies. This is actually the way wealth really is built, with these advanced planning directions and planning strategies we've covered as financial planners. But there is an ironic theme that I think is interesting. The majority of people who are successful build wealth through something so simple that you have access to as well, and that's index funds.
That's exactly right. Most people don't think of them as being this incredibly exciting, sexy thing, but we have a large financial planning firm. We work with a number of very wealthy individuals, and every single one of them, the common trait that you see throughout is they take advantage of index funds inside of their investment portfolio.
You and I both resemble this. I mean, if you ask me what are the majority of my investable assets in my brokerage accounts, my retirement accounts, and other things, they're in index funds. Right. But don't take our word for it. It's not just what we experience with our clients. It's not just what we experience ourselves. The research shows this too. I mean, Ramsey Solutions does the biggest survey of millionaires, and 80% of their respondents built their millions within their retirement plan, their company 401k. And then we do our own survey of our clients who are millionaires, and we ask them, hey, how did you build your money? How did you build your wealth? And surprisingly, you can see the lion's share, 68% are savers / investors. It's not from, we always think of the Wall Street tycoons or the senior executives. That's 19%. Entrepreneurs, yes, they're the risk takers. Sure. That's 8%. And then we have the virtuoso. That's somebody who has such an incredible talent or skill that they're paid so incredibly well that they're wealthy. No, the majority of people are just like me, you, and everyone else. We build our wealth by being consistent and saving, and index funds can be a big part of that. Take advantage of these tools.
What I think is awesome is all these strategies we've laid out are available to you. While you may think that lifestyles of the rich and famous are only for the rich and famous, it's not the case. Building wealth is incredibly simple. It's just not always easy. But there are some slightly more advanced strategies you can implement today to help you take your finances to the next level.
So don't try to cut the corner off. I know we live in a society now where everybody's trying to get rich quick. They're trying to figure out how they can have an edge. Look, I want you to take advantage of the abundance cycle. Come load up on all the free information. Even go out to our website, moneyguide.com/resources. We have tons of free deliverables and other things. We really are just trying to accelerate you on your journey to creating abundance, because we know once you reach the level where you're the CEO of a 7-figure enterprise, that's what your portfolio will be, you're going to need some help. You're not going to know what you don't know. And we want you to go check out Abound Wealth, The Money Guy Show. We work with people all across the country. And then, look, if you're a person that's aspirational and you need to speed up the process, go to learn.moneyguy.com. We have courses and tools that will also help you with that. We just love creating content. This is the greatest passion project. Never supposed to be a marketing tool. It was supposed to just be our online classroom, since we have hearts of educators, and it has exploded. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm your host, Brian Preston. Mr. Bo Hansen, Money Guy team, out.